Good afternoon, everybody. It's a lovely, lovely Tuesday here on the East Coast in Baltimore, Washington area. A steamy southern day. And over the past few days, we've had some fun conversations about a number of topics in college sports. And I guess the one that has struck the most nerve is whether the ACC can survive after um, a poaching, if it all happens, and nothing right now is for sure. That's about the one thing we do know is nothing is certain at this moment. Um, but that being said, we need to chat about the fun stuff of what could happen. And earlier, I penned a couple of stories. One about the ACC, one about what's going on in Congress and throughout um, this potential bill that comes up that, in essence, is giving Congress the opportunity to regulate what goes on in college sports. Um, I guess when you think about it, it's more of the NCAA advocating their position and giving it to the United States government. And whether that's a good idea or a bad idea, I'm going to go on the air on the side it's a bad idea. But then again, the NCAA has learned to disappoint me on numerous occasions. So I guess that shouldn't be a surprise. Now, let's start with what this bill does and doesn't do. There's a lot of good things in the bill. Let's start with that. There's a lot of good items in there, specifically if you are someone who likes Olympic sports, and of course, if you are a Title IX advocate, as I am, where you want women's sports to, you know, at least be given a shot. And I think that all that in the bill is a good thing. They don't have anything with regard to. I mean, the Big Ten and the SEC signed off on some things on it, but not everything. And so we don't know. They've given support to the concept of the bill, and what I mean by that is that the bill could potentially pass in September, um, but there's going to be a lot of negotiating between now and then just on the Senate bill. The Senate bill then would have to go to the House. The House is not as easily swayed by what goes on as the Senate. So um, you're going to have this opportunity for the House to tack on a number of amendments or take away things. Then it'll go back to the House for, I'm sorry, to the Senate um, for final going over before the president would sign it into law. That's going to be a real tough slog to get that through. But there are people who feel that with some tweaks here and there that they might be able to make it work. I don't see that happening, but it's anything's possible. The other things, what do we talk about? Okay, there's a limit. I know people are freaking out about this. There's a limit on how large a conference can be. 19 seems to be the number. That's going to be negotiable. My guess is they'll end up somewhere around 2022, and that's where they want to be. The other thing, which Senator Ashley Moody of Florida, who, by the way, is from Plant City, Florida. For those of you who don't know where Plant City is, it is a lovely little hamlet in the easternmost part of Hillsborough County, which basically is Tampa. And she's a graduate of the University of Florida and was appointed by Governor Ron DeSantis. She did serve as the Attorney General for the state for a number of years. And so now Ms. Moody is Senator Moody. She replaced Marco Rubio, who became the Secretary of State. So there's your history lesson for the day about Ashley Moody. Ashley Moody proposed an amendment which was on the table supposedly, where the original plan was if you're going to leave a conference for another conference, you had to be an independent for 5 years. Well, that was pretty much a non-starter for everybody. Ashley Moody has moved it to 180 days. If you choose to leave the conference in 180 days, you must be basically you must be invited. Obviously, you can't leave, you're not going to leave the conference without an invite. So there's that. And where do you go, and how much money do you have to get to make that work? And a bunch of interesting little tidbits, but 180 days is what you got. So there's that. And I think that, of course, there's the NIL stuff, there's the collective bargaining, there's all of the different is enjoyable to speak with, and we're going to let him pop in. Okay. If you hit on that, that should get you in here. And always have time for you, my friend. And from the CFB Mafia himself, the College Football Mafia. If it's an issue, please let me know, and I'll get it to you some other way. So, vamping here at the moment. Again, Ashley Moody's deal is 180-day deal, and here he is. There's Bomber. Hey, guy, how you doing?
Hang on a second. Let me turn off my other mic. There we go. How we doing?
We're doing okay. We're doing okay. I see
Excellent.
that we disagree, and as I said in the post, you and I have great respect for each other. I certainly feel that what you've got going here is certainly worth considering. Most of what I do here on this ACC thing is my goal is to look at some of the options that the league itself are looking at. You
Okay.
know, so the latest one I put out was something that I know they're looking at 5, 6, maybe as many as 8 different options. And the most recent one was the one I posted the other day. By the way, for those of you who say, "What the hell happened to Louisville and Virginia?" That was a brain mistake on my part. It was late at night. I wasn't thinking. All right, so they're there. So anyway, that's where the genesis of this is, and see, just to finish off the thought, people think for some reason I want the the Big 12 killed, and I'm like, yeah, I'm not a mafia hitman here. I know I don't want them to die. I mean, I want them to live. I want these two conferences actually surprisingly need each other, because if they don't, then we're going to end up with just the SEC and the the Big Ten. So anyway, enough of me. Your turn, sir. Good to have you.
Sure. Yeah, I wasn't necessarily thinking this was going to be a big story day or anything. I happened to be going through setting up a show for this evening, and I saw that you were live. So, always happy to be here. How are you doing first?
I'm doing okay. I mean, I really am. Um,
That's very,
it's
very good.
I mentioned that every time I mention the fact that BYU is the most um, uh, the most unentertaining and recognizable brand in the conference, I get clobbered by a bunch of people who don't seem to understand. By the way, I had mentioned that Frank Carney, who is the guy who uh, kind of set the ball rolling for BYU's national plan.
Right.
I asked him about joining you with your group, and he said, that anytime you wanted him, he would. And so I will get you his phone number and his contact information.
That would be really cool. Obviously, speaking with people that have been in college sports a lot longer than myself, I love tapping into that knowledge. So it'd be great to talk to him. Absolutely.
He actually reminded me of something I didn't remember,
What's
and
that?
that was that not only did he take all the BYU football games live, he took all the BYU basketball games live, which
Wow.
in, which
Okay.
included the Danny Ainge years of BYU basketball.
Wow. I did not know that.
Yeah. So I think, and correct me if I'm wrong. Um, I think the first year, and I could be wrong on this, the first year that, and Carney was looking into it for me. I think
Oh,
the
okay.
first year of BYU basketball, I'm sorry, football was Jim Nance.
Oh, really? Oh, yeah. Jim Nance. Yes, he was in Utah.
No,
That's where he
he
started.
did BYU football for a while.
Yeah,
Uh,
he was actually he worked at KSL.
ESL. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Jimmy
KSL
was.
TV.
He reminded me of it. He's like, "Hey, you do remember I did BYU?" I said, "Yeah, I remember it, but hell, it's been so long, I can't remember when it was." So you know,
Very good.
from your standpoint, right? You're there. You've been a wonderful supporter of not only just BYU but the Big 12 and college football in general. Um, what do we have to do to fix this?
Well, first of all, I we have to get out of the idea that it has to be zero sum,
Yeah,
right? When we started
agreed.
talking realignment years ago, uh, it was all zero sum because you're greedily wanting to take care of you and yours,
Mm-hmm.
and that necessarily meant that the for the Big 12 to thrive, it would have to be at the expense of the ACC and vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
Um, all that has changed because we now come to find out there's not as much money out there as everybody thought there was going to be.
Thank you. Thank you very
Yeah,
much, sir.
the recession has been real. Wars and taxes are real. These are things that matter out in the real world. College football world is very hyper focused on itself, reasonably so, but we do live in a larger world of people that simply don't care. Believe it or not, they care about a lot of other things like their social benefits in their states and infrastructure and so many other things. So, um, at the end of the day, we thought it was going to be one thing. We are now 4 years later. It has
Mm-hmm.
turned out to be something else. Everybody needs to just change their paradigm. And in my opinion,
Mm-hmm.
there can be a middle ground, but it revolves around two things. It revolves, in my opinion, it revolves around what schools remain in the ACC post the next move, which I think I reasonably believe at some point will happen in 2029, 2030, 31. Um, if the ACC loses its three biggest brands, and they are a top three branded conference, you just have to look at viewership and you can see that. Um, in comparison to the Big 12, which is more spread out evenly from viewership.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, in that case, now what we have to deal with is what is the next thing, and the question comes: uh, is a best of the rest conference possible uh, with the eight best? And I say best; it's relative.
Mm-hmm.
Brands coming out of the Big 12 and the ACC getting together after the ACC loses its top brands, whether that's three or seven or nine, it doesn't really matter. Um, that's going to be the question: is does the Big 12 absorb? Does the ACC absorb? Or do the smartest guys in the room get together and decide they can create something better? So I think that's kind of where we're at. The paradigm has completely shifted. but everybody realignment is not what it used to be, and there's not enough money out there. And in fact, there's a lot less money than there was 5 years ago, and everybody just needs to get used to the fact that if your school isn't worth $80 million, you're not worth being picked up by the SEC or the Big Ten. It's that simple.
Well, the other
Um,
thing too, and not um, is networks don't have the money that people think they do. That's the issue that I try to explain to folks. You've got the NFL, Major League Baseball, the NHL, NBA, you know, a ton of portfolio content out there. And yes, there's no question that college football drives a lot of that. But when you've lost a lot of money, as the cable industry can attest to, um, and now it's shrinking, and everybody's looking to direct to consumer and streaming deals. uh, You know, I'm at a point where if we just look at the streaming and how to get to where we are, at what point does it cost us so much money that we as sports fans have to pick and choose what we actually get to watch on television?
for sure. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. And who's the strongest voice at the table is the other
Mhm.
thing, is who's dictating to whom.
Yeah.
Um, and at this point, as far as the ACC is concerned, it's all around Notre Dame.
Mhm.
If Notre Dame decides to refortify in a weaker, and you have to say it's a weaker ACC if you lose those top brands, the ACC will continue to thrive and survive. If the Notre Dame decides they want something bigger, they negotiate a deal with the SEC or the Big Ten as for scheduling agreement. If one of those two largest, most important conferences get together and they in some way can offer something that Notre Dame can get to secure their independence forever and a day, which I think will happen. Um, Notre Dame's not joining the conference. They'll do a scheduling agreement with whoever's best um, at the time and who can get them the most opportunities. So I kind of think at the end of the day we're going to end up with 20 team conferences and a third conference that is the smartest of the rest. If you don't want to say best of the rest.
Mhm. I've spoken to a bunch of SEC and Big Ten people, and the real the SEC has absolutely no expectation that Notre Dame wants to be a partner with them. It doesn't track with with the history of Notre Dame and where they want to play and where they want to be. Uh, the Big Ten and Notre Dame have had a love hate relationship for many years. I think it all in this whole time, Jim Phillips has had numerous discussions with Pete Bavacqua over what's going on. I don't, people think that I'm, as I said before, killing one conference to save another, and that's not the case right now. I don't think the Big Ten, the SEC, the Big 12, or the ACC really know what's going to happen in the next year or two. Um, and I say that meaning they have a whole bunch of contingency plans, but I don't know that they have landed on what plan makes the most sense for them. And I think a lot of it has to do with this the bill that's making its way um, through the Senate and then off to to Congress. I don't have a great deal of faith that that bill's ever going to see the light of day, but we will see.
The other thing, I guess, if we're having a conversation about this, Jim, is what does survive look like?
Hmm.
Right? Is it minimum amounts of money, or can schools pay as much as they possibly can to stay relevant in football, Can they do that within their current media valuation, donations, everything they have access to for their athletic programs? Can they survive on roughly half or a little less than half of what the SEC and the Big Ten can make? That's an open question. Nobody knows the answer to that. But I think
No.
the valuations of these programs, they're not professional entities. So these guesses at what an open market value would be on a school, I think, are kind of silly. But they do show who's smartest with their money,
Hmm.
and those are the teams that are going to survive because they're going to be able to keep their teams together longer, their staffs together longer, and they're
Hmm.
going to have more success on the football field. But is that cap? How many? I'll just ask you a question. How many schools right now out of the ACC and the Big 12 can you say without a doubt can compete reasonably well for win or two in the college football playoff? How many teams in those two conferences do you think can do it?
4.
Four in each, you're saying.
Yeah, no, I'm saying
So
you're asking me to they could win a championship. Is that what you said?
no, no, compete in the
Oh,
playoff.
I'm
I'm not.
sorry. I
I'm
thought
not
you meant
talking
win a
about yet.
championship.
No,
No, I would
no.
say 4 in each conference.
Okay, I think that's about right. Depending on the year and depending on the school, I think that's probably pretty. That's a pretty good guess, actually.
I
So
would
if
say
you
in your
say
in the
eight,
yeah,
go
I
ahead.
would say I'll give you my 8 and you can give me yours. Okay, fair enough.
Sure, sure.
All right, in the Big 12, the hat you're wearing, that's one of them. Okay,
Right.
Arizona State, if Kenny Dillingham can continue to recruit as well as he can. Texas Tech, I'm kind of like on the fence, but they should be able to compete. And then the fourth member of that group, I would have to say, would be Utah.
Okay.
So those be the four in the Big 12 that I think can consistently compete.
I agree with those four. That's who I would have picked as well.
Okay. If I'm and I'm now talking about the present, I guess, ACC. Miami's at the top of that list because
Right.
they have really done a good job of keeping. Cristobal is a hell of a recruiter. He understood how to get to where he needs to go. Um, so I'll put them at number one in the ACC.
Okay.
I'm going to go with number two. Um, Number two, to me, in the ACC at this point in time, is probably Clemson, and that's a I don't know what to do with Dabo Sweeney at this point. He has had 3 consecutive bad seasons at Clemson. He doesn't quite understand the portal. He's not, Clemson's not Clemson of 4 years ago.
Yeah.
Um, it's funny too because I don't know what the hell's going on at FSU. So I want to put him in there, but I don't know what Mike Norvell's doing. And here's the thing that I have asked a number of times. If you can't afford to bind the Mike Norvell out of his contract, which is basically what I've been told by many people who are highly, um, highly up in the FSU hierarchy, if you can't afford that, how are you going to get out of the conference with $75 million?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. This is the worst possible time in college football history to be down,
Yeah,
right?
and so
Florida State and Clemson are
are
brands, though.
are not they're not making a case for themselves. That's for
They're
damn sure.
not helping themselves. It's
No,
true,
and
but
then
but they are brands.
to sue the conference, is not necessarily making. You're sitting there in the Big 12, and you've got Brett Yormark, and he's like, do we want people who, when they don't get their way, they're going to stomp their feet and go to the court? Um, I don't know, but and then the fourth brand, I think, and surprisingly, to me anyway, the fourth brand is a brand that I think people are going to be surprised by, and that's Cal. Cal's done a really good job of recruiting, and I'm interested in seeing what they do. Now
Do
that
they
could
have
be.
the booster support? Does Cal have the booster
Oh yeah, they got
support?
money. They
Okay.
got like a lot of money.
Okay.
Um,
So how do we end up talking about North Carolina as the gem of
I
realignment
don't get it.
or
I got
Virginia? I
myself in a
mean,
lot of I got a lot myself in a lot of trouble by going on a radio station in Durham and saying, "I love to go to UNC. It's a beautiful area up over there in Raleigh, Durham, but I sure as hell don't understand why they're falling all over themselves to get North Carolina. I just don't
yeah,
get it. I mean, it's like, to be honest, it's like when the SEC added Missouri and when the Big Ten added Nebraska. I don't, the fit's not there. I don't get it. Um, Smarter minds than me have certainly decided this is where they wanted to be, but why everybody is tripping over themselves for North Carolina? A fantastic school, don't get me wrong. Wonderful campus, great facilities. Um, actually did a number of games out of the Dean Dome and even few football games, because not a lot of people did football games about North Carolina there for a while until Mac Brown came back. So I don't know. I mean, I have, to me, they're not the shining star. I guess they are to, at least that's what we're being led to believe, I should say, by the Big Ten. Um, you got any thoughts about it? I mean, Big Ten and SEC both.
I I think all of this has been a psyop for the last 3.5 years.
It probably
I
is. Yeah.
think I think this is all
Bait
PR.
and switch.
Well, I don't know about date and switch. You get a brand. Your North Carolina is a brand. You can't turn that down.
No.
But up to today, realignment's been about football.
Yeah.
So if you're going to take the best football brands,
Yeah.
North Carolina wouldn't be. But I think that fourth position could go to a lot of schools. I think
Sure.
Louisville in football has certainly
Maybe.
proved
Yeah.
itself. Virginia Tech has come out and played. North Carolina State
Mm-hmm.
has definitely proven things. Georgia Tech is
Yeah.
another good one. So all I'm saying is it's three brands and then everybody else.
Yeah.
Viewership shows that. Viewership follows money. Um, or money follows viewership, depending on how you look at it. And so, in my opinion, the ACC is going to live or die by its association with scheduling agreement with Notre Dame, and who ends up getting the call up to go to the Big Ten and the SEC. If it ends up being, if we say 2 and 4, if we say 6, and go to the SEC and the Big Ten, I don't see how the ACC survives in its current form without Notre Dame underpinning it. And I think that's where when you've had these conversations on
Mm-hmm.
Twitter, and you're so patient with a lot of people on Twitter about you're against us or for us. You're brave to take that stuff on. Um, in my opinion, it's really about Notre Dame at that point, and everybody else is just along for the ride. And that's where you get the pushback about, well, the Big 12 will be sitting ready to accept the next four brands. And this is where you and I disagree a little bit. I do think the Big 12 is worth more if you were to take, let's say,
You
Louisville,
froze on me
Georgia
there, buddy.
Tech. Oh, sorry, am
Oh,
I
you
back?
went Yeah, now you're back. Go ahead.
Okay, I was just gonna say. Let me just finish. I'll finish that thought.
Sure.
So if the Big Ten and the SEC take 6 schools, in my opinion, and where you and I disagree,
Mhm.
is I think if Notre Dame doesn't underpin the ACC schedule at that point, they decide they want a tougher schedule, whoever that may be, a scheduling agreement with somebody else. If that happens and they leave the ACC, then that's where you get the conversation from the Big 12 folks about. I think the Big 12 is stronger by absorbing Louisville, Georgia Tech, Virginia Tech and or whoever. I do believe that does make a difference. I still believe that.
Oh, I don't
Uh,
disagree with you on that.
yeah.
I
So
don't.
I think that's where I think that's where people get lost. You sort of you've said a full statement and people take parts of your
They
statements.
kind of carve it up to make
They
their
do.
own point. To
They
make
do.
their own point.
Yeah.
You can't lose six brands and expect necessarily Notre Dame to stick around. Um,
And that's my contention.
you
That's
know,
been yeah.
so my theory of the case, if you will, is that I don't think that um, either the Big Ten or the SEC want more than two
Each.
each. I
Okay.
don't
So
think that,
that's
but
still four though.
I still four. But if you take the four, right? If you take the four brands
Uh,
and you put them together, because this one I did some research on from a standpoint of you take the four that we talked about: North Carolina. Let's take this: North Carolina, FSU, Clemson, Miami. They're equal to those four teams are equal to Oklahoma and Texas.
okay.
So my point being that at that point in time, you've got two conferences, the Big 12 and the ACC, that are, depending upon how you backfill, um, are relatively close to each other. I'm not going to say one's bigger. I mean, you could argue either one that the Big 12 might be better in football than the ACC at that point. That'd be a fair argument. But my point would be that both of them have mid-level brands and then backfilled with some decent group of six teams.
Yes,
Yeah,
that's true.
and that's my point is that a guy who doesn't get enough credit is Bob Bowlesby, who was 90 days away from losing the conference,
Right.
but ran out, grabbed UCF, grabbed Cincinnati, grabbed Houston, which, by the way, on their own would not have helped them save the conference, but then got you guys,
Yeah.
BYU, into the mix. That
Yeah.
stabilized things for a while. Then the Pac 12 just exploded out of total hubris and ignorancy.
Yes.
Um, and there was no place for them to go. Um, and I say that not that a lot of people felt, and this I think is not the way it was done because I spoke to a lot of people about this. Yormark was smart. He didn't push it. He didn't say, he said the door is open, but he didn't do any backdoor stuff.
Right.
It was all about hey, wait a minute. Um, hang on a second. Um, BYU in Houston is high ROI for the Big Ten, Big 12. Um, okay, I'm not going to dispute it. But my point being that what we need to look at is what's the healthiest thing for both conferences. You know, if you lose those four, and as I just said, Bowlesby doesn't get enough credit for stabilizing conference, then the jump in and grabbing the money that the that ESPN and Fox were going to offer the Pac-12, um, and then being there and not trying to take away those brands, but giving those brands the flexibility to think about what life would be like in the Big 12. And he scores the four schools, okay, and that keeps the conference relevant and keeps the conference together, and that's good. There's nothing wrong with that. That is absolutely fantastic. What I don't understand, and maybe you can help me on this, is why do some of the Big 12 fans have such an inferiority complex?
Well, I think you know the answer to this. The answer is because
I'm trying
they
to be
were
polite
picked
here, buddy.
they were picked apart for years and left for dead. So it's a PTSD response from the fact of we get no respect. Rodney Dangerfield conference. The other thing, and I commented on this. I can't remember if you replied to my one of my silly comments, but uh, I don't think. I just lost my train of thought. It'll come back to me. There was a message you put out. Oh, I don't think it's a good thing that the Big 12 is the most equal conference. I don't
I'm
think
sorry.
that is not a good thing. Um, the ACC is worth more now because they have three alpha teams that have
Well,
all
that's
won national
now. Yeah.
championships, right? That
Right.
but
No,
see, I
I.
think that makes a difference. I think
Oh, yeah.
right now it's not great
Mhm.
when you. I know at least, and maybe I took it out of context, but when you made the comment, it kind of looked, it sounded kind of like a deprecating. Is
You
that the right
mean
word?
condescending?
Condescending. Yeah, hey, they're the most equal conference, or whatever your words were. That isn't a good thing. I wouldn't bring that up as a bonus. And yet ESPN said that now for years, and in doing so, they minimize the entire thing, and
Yeah.
they're able to give themselves an out by not um, pumping up the conference because they say you guys are all basically B and C brands. We love you, but it's only to fill the dark hours of the night in scheduling. We don't need to put your best brands on during the middle of the day or in prime time. So I don't think it's a good thing. Whenever I hear that now, depending on, I mean, it doesn't matter who says it,
Right.
I'm always with the same response. I don't think it's great that the conference is the most equal. It needs to be unequal to catch that flyer and increase their values.
Yeah. No, I wouldn't disagree with that. I'm just saying that, and I believe I used the term balance, but I
Oh,
could,
balanced. Okay.
yeah.
Yep. Yep. Balanced. Yep.
And I say that because in some regards, um, I see that competition. Do you want the big, the alpha dog? Sure. I mean, if that happens, it happens. But what's wrong with four or five different teams each year from the conference having a shot at the college football playoffs and potentially a national championship? And and so I guess that's where my analysis of the Big 12 was, I don't know, misunderstood, or maybe I was off base. But I was talking about the balance of the conference. I don't think in college football that there's a more balanced conference right now than the Big 12, and
See,
that's
I
not
would argue that that's not exactly the case. If you look at
okay.
the last 3 years, who the same brands have been at the top of the conference. There's been a couple that have rotated in or out, but is the conference more valuable if Texas Tech, BYU, Utah et al. Win a playoff game or more?
No. Our question from Jerry. Hello, Jerry. In what ways do you think the ACC and Big 12 can cooperate for each league to become better? Um,
That's a good
there was
question,
a,
Jerry.
there was a lot of talk, um, a couple of different times. I, when I say this and people don't believe me, Jim Phillips and Brett Yormark are friends. Okay, they get along with each other. There's no animosity there. Um, there was when Bowlesby and Sankey sat next to each other at the at these major events, and Sankey doesn't tell Bowlesby, oh, by the way, we're taking your two biggest you know brands away from you. There, I don't think that much has been spoken of those two guys talking to each other ever again. I think that I would love to see an opportunity for these two conferences to put together what I would think would be a lot of fun, and that's uh, a situation where they play each other on a weekly, schedule it so you have the two
Mm,
teams from each conference um, playing each other every week, um, which I think would boister both conferences. Have a game each week that is uh, uh, an ACC Big 12 football game, and that would be you could schedule it. It wouldn't be that hard to do,
right.
and I think that would be um, a good thing. You could probably sell that to a streaming service. You could probably sell it to it's certainly since my understanding is, and he hasn't totally said it yet, but Mark wants to take the TV deal to open market. I think more than anything, he wants to do that only because he wants to split apart the basketball rights and the football rights. But yeah, I think that would be a fun thing to see.
Yeah, so let's talk about that because that, and this was even years ago when I was talking about the ACC being picked apart and Big 12
Hmm.
having an opportunity to take the best brands. I'm not talking about that so much anymore,
Hmm.
although we've covered it here a little bit. I think um, the I don't know how you could conceivably put two conferences together, and let's assume six leave. Uh, let's just assume six schools leave the ACC. They go from 17 to 11. Um, 11 plus 16 is 20, what? 27 teams over the two conferences. Uh, I don't see a world where a 27 team super conference is able to survive that is making, again, a little over or a little under half what the SEC and the Big Ten are making. So a complete
No,
merge.
I wasn't saying merge.
No, no, no. I'm saying that. I'm not
Okay.
saying. I'm not talking about what you said. I'm commenting on the idea how they can work together. I
Hmm.
like the scheduling agreement thing you're talking about.
Hmm.
That'd be great. 12 weeks. Well, maybe not the last 4 weeks, but the first 8 or 9 weeks of the season have games each week. Each one representing a Big 10, a Big 12, and an ACC team. I think that's a fine idea. I would love to see something like that. But I'm talking about how where do you do sorry, where do you go? Let's assume we're talking about the Big 12 sitting there having an opportunity to take ACC schools, and you make the statement that why don't we just combine, and then we'll come up with the best schedules that we can. It'll more regionalize our football scheduling, and we'll have a greater access. More teams might be available for a playoff, which then
Hmm.
might increase our media valuation. A merge, in essence. Um, I don't know how you can do that when you have brands in these two conferences that really struggle to keep up their end. And I'm not going to name them, but
Hmm.
I could come up with four schools in each conference that over the last 5 years have not carried their weight. I could easily call out those schools and say how can you build a conference, a super conference, including these 8 schools that essentially bring down what your media value is. I don't know how to answer that question without some sort of a uh, contraction, a consolidation, not a realignment, not a merge. And so I think that's probably the biggest concern you would have about how you are able to maximize what's left in the ACC and the Big 12
Hmm.
without carrying forward some school brands that aren't carrying their weight.
Well, you'd have to do it by the merit-based system,
They see
and
that's how I would do it.
yeah,
I
I
think you
mean,
set goals and you say to be in this group, you have to have you need to meet these minimums. I've said that for a long time.
well, you and I are soccer fans, so we know what relegation is like.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah.
So if you want to play in the big pool, you're going to have to prove that you can play in the big pool.
I see I agree with that. Merit is I think where it should be at. I really do.
Mm. And
Um,
we had a question here about um, what was it? Gives them opportunity televised. Normally would have televised. Maybe Big 12 could benefit from that. Um, the ACCCW deal is actually Jefferson Pilot had that regional package for a number of years, and it's not. I don't know that there's not a lot of money involved in that deal.
No.
First and foremost. Second of all, and the guys at CW are good friends. I don't want to rain on this parade, but the thing that I think it would benefit the second and third tier schools in the Big 12, perhaps because it would give them a national television exposure on linear television. But beyond that, I don't see where that would. It's not a big benefit to the ACC at this point either. It just
No.
gets more linear, television on, but the windows that they're picking are not helping them in that regard. So, to answer your question, um, is it's not a net gain. It's not hurting you. Let me get that straight. It's not hurting you, but it's a game that would probably have been on an ACC network versus you know a a national broadcast. So I think that's the best I can do to answer that question. There's no way less than a dozen schools part ACC if two or three are allowed to leave. The Senate knows this because they've talked to them, and Big 12 shouldn't get excited about. Okay, we'll excuse the English language there in the
Michael's
question.
fun. Michael's
Um,
fun.
it's I well if it does if wait no, there's no way a dozen schools depart. I don't think anybody thinks a dozen schools going to depart the
Yeah, I don't know
ACC.
where they would. Yeah,
You
there's
wouldn't have a
not.
yeah,
Yeah.
you wouldn't have a league if a dozen if a dozen schools left. Um,
Yeah, the
so,
ACC would disband if 12 schools left. They would have to rebuild that conference over a period of 3 years, like the Pac-12 did, and in the process, they would have no media value.
it would mean relegation for the Big 12. I don't understand how that would make. Okay. Look, Michael. I hate to be a pain in the neck. I don't. I'm not quite sure what that means. Relegation for the Big 12.
I think what he's talking about is the big super conference idea
Oh, I see what
where
you're
the
saying.
Big Ten
Okay.
goes to the Big
Yeah, I
Ten
get
goes to
it. Okay. Yeah.
24 and the SEC goes to
Okay.
20
Yeah.
or
Okay. Then
21.
there's no ACC. Yeah, I get it. All right.
And he's saying the Big 12 then would be also relegated. If that was to happen and the SEC and the Big 10 did go to 24, which I do not believe will happen. Michael
No, I
knows
don't
this because
either.
he watches my show. If that were to happen, then the Big 12 would essentially, to survive, would absorb what's left of the ACC, whatever those brands were, and they would get to, in fact, that would be 10 plus 4, so it would be 14 teams potentially leaving the ACC up, depending on where they go, to the Big Ten and SEC and the Big 12, because the
Right.
Big 12 would absorb X number of schools as well. I don't see the Big 12 expanding and growing with Wake Forest, Syracuse, Boston College. Um, I don't, if the Big 12 is that's who they could bring in, the other conferences would have left them far behind. So um, it would essentially then you could merge the two conferences. I don't think there's a, and Michael knows this. I do not believe, and haven't for years now, believe there's enough media money out there to expand the Big Ten and the SEC past 20 teams. I just don't. I cannot. I've run the numbers. I've looked at the data we've done in the past, and right now you go past the top three brands in the ACC. Um, Not even talking about Big 12 top brands,
Mhm.
BYU and Texas Tech and TCU are at the top of the Big 12 viewership. But if you were to take those best viewership numbers
Right.
and fold them into the Big 10 and the SEC, then you would have minimal numbers that would keep the Big 12 alive. I mean, essentially, it would be a relegated conference. So
It says right now, let's see what to say. The only school with enough money to lead the ACC right now is SMU.
I
Oh,
don't think that's true.
no. Let me, okay, agree, Bomber, for two numbers.
Carla's smart, by the way. Carla Jenkins, super smart.
Well,
Appreciate you, Carla.
there you go, Carla. Um, Let me just hit you with a number for those of you who think that SMU is Stanford has an endowment of $48 billion. They could buy the ACC if they
Several
want.
times over.
Right, several times over. So, just saying, I know we look a lot about look. And SMU is not a poor school either. Don't get me wrong. But if you're looking at sheer cash, the money, the money that Stanford brings in is just ridiculous. Um, your point is, and I've spoken to a number of broadcast people about this, and as we talked about, there is not a never ending pool of money.
Right.
Uh, you could make a case right now that the SEC and the Big Ten don't have to add anybody, and they're still going to get the numbers they want.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, right now there is an argument. Okay, and again, I'm going back in time now, but
Okay.
when the ACC settled with uh, Florida State and Clemson, in that moment, I said I don't think there's a reason to do realignment right now. If I'm the
Mhm.
SEC and the Big Ten, what's the purpose of bringing in additional schools? We already did the math. And
Right.
the math says that there isn't a school outside of Notre Dame that
Mhm.
generates enough media money to pay for themselves. In fact, they would pay for two or three other schools on their own, Notre Dame would. But
Mhm.
the Big Ten is not going to bring a school in. Let's talk about the Duke idea, right? Guys on my team, some of them believe Duke is willing to not only take the SMU option, pay its way into the Big Ten of the SEC. But in doing so, it doesn't matter if they go a decade without media money, they will pay their way every year. And what I say is
You're
that number is
crazy.
going to be 180 to $100 million every year to not take a penny out of Minnesota's pocket, to not take a penny out of Indiana or Purdue's pocket. So there's not a brand out there, including my BYU Cougars, who were pretty high on that list, by the way. They're about fourth or fifth. But talking about just valuation,
Yeah.
there isn't a school out there that is going to make more than 60 or 65. Maybe with inflation now, you might
Yeah.
say Miami's 70. But that is nowhere near the 80 to 120 million each school, because the Big Ten's going to renegotiate everybody. They're going
Yeah.
to get more money. It's not going to be another 25% jump
No.
or whatever.
No.
It'll be
It's.
10 or
I
15%,
was gonna
something
say
like that.
if they get 10, they're lucky. If they get 15, they're blissful.
Okay, so there you go, 10 to
Yeah.
15%, which means basically keeping up with inflation at this point.
Exactly.
So the Big Ten's going to bring money in, but they're not going to bring enough money in that everybody's going to turn around and say yes. Please bring in Clemson, who I know not only makes less money, and I'm going to have to subsidize them, but at the same time, they're going to kick our ass every 3 years. Why
But
would you do that? Why would? And I'm
you
not saying that
wouldn't.
Minnesota would get their ass kicked. I'm trying to make
Right. Right.
an object lesson here.
Right.
There is no reason for these conferences to expand and bring in alpha males that are going to
Right.
not only push them down more on the competition scale, but they have to You have to subsidize them to be in.
Right.
There is no rush to go to 20 teams even in the Big Ten or the SEC. There's no money to do it.
No.
So everybody talking about 22, 24 teams, it's ridiculous. And I say this to guys on my team. I say it's absolutely ridiculous. It's not going to happen because there's not enough money.
Stanford could buy Fox and gift it to Notre Dame. That's a funny one. What do we got here? Tom, what you got? If the ACC loses border city schools war chest, X have a network, does it affect? Um,
That's a good question.
Yeah,
That's a good
here's a
question, Bear.
there's a interesting thing going on here, where the ACC network is being. It used to be like if it would go to a state, then the entire state would be. Um, right now, if you're watching the ACC network in a non-ACC area, the amount a cable company pays for it is approximately 15 to 25 cents per sub. If a school goes into your region, meaning an ACC school ends up in your region, like it did in California, um, it jumps between $1.50 to $2, depending upon the size of the region. Now, when Cal and Stanford went to the ACC, the state of California did not all chip in $1.50 to $2 per subscriber. That was done regionally in Northern California, not in Southern California, not in even Central California. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is it depends on where you're backfilling and the market size as to whether or not the entire state's not going to pay it. It's going to be the region and the market size of that. So that's why the backfilling has to be um, important and should be important to what markets are you getting into. It was actually Bowlesby who did a market thing before he did pick it. And I know a lot of Memphis people are getting bent out of shape. I can't explain it, folks, in Memphis. I do have no idea why a Memphis isn't on either the ACC or the Big 12 short list. They haven't been, and it's not, don't kill the messenger. I'm just telling you that they're still not on the short list.
I think, and that's a great question by Tom Dubay. There is a world where you could see the ACC fighting to bring in Big 12 schools using the money that they get from Clemson, Miami, and Florida State, and whoever else leaving. There is going to be money there, but I think something that people need to pay attention to is the example we had with the Pac-12. The Pac-12 got all kinds of money when the schools left.
Yeah.
In fact, they got hundreds of millions of dollars.
They have
when
$400
the
million.
schools left, and yet it didn't turn out to be a one-to-one relationship on how they spent that money.
No.
You have to first fortify the conference you continue to run, and in
Right.
doing so, those schools are going to want some of that money. So there's only a small percentage you're going to be able to put to bring in other schools outside of something like a private equity or a private capital type deal that can underwrite the debt spending to bring in other schools. That's really the only way that can be. And the Big 12 has the same issue. The Big 12 would need to pay exit fees for people coming to the conference, right. And usually that's done over years. It's not done all at once.
No, so, it's a lending process.
Yeah, well, sure. And if you're Wake Forest, and you know that your conference just secured, what is it, $300 million for 3 schools leaving at $75 million per. Right. If you're Wake Forest, are you voting to give that money to somebody else to expand your conference to again push you down farther on the ladder?
No.
Or are you going to want that money in your pocket just to survive and compete?
Of course.
So
Right.
it's not a blank check, everybody. Well, there a lot of people, Jim, don't do the math. They don't work it out. They just see big excess fees means you can use them for whatever you want to. And the Pac-12 fiasco showed us really what that looks like, and it's
Yeah.
nothing like what you might imagine. The money is going to go
No.
to the schools that are still in the conference to help them survive in modern day college football, and then they'll try to beg, borrow, and steal other schools to join the conference. That are A4 schools. If that doesn't happen, they will fortify with the best G6
Mhm.
schools available. And then
Right.
at that point, the look in would be a big deal because this is why the SMU, Cal, and Stanford move was so big because
Mhm.
they were anticipating Clemson leaving. They were
Yeah.
anticipating Florida State and Miami, North
Mm.
Carolina leaving. And in doing so, they don't have to worry about the way the ACC is put together. The conference will continue to exist. They
Mhm.
still have their contract with ESPN, and it'll continue to go. But it's not as easy as just saying, well, we're going to buy Utah, or we're going to buy TCU, or we're going to buy Kansas, or Oklahoma State, or whoever.
It would.
That's
It
not how
makes
it
no.
works.
It would make no sense. Real quick, Michael, is Sports Talk Florida a Miami fan? Sports Talk Florida is a neutral source. Um, we provide content to Sports Talk Florida. Um, there's going to be stories on there that's going to look like it's pro Miami, it'll look like it's pro Florida, pro Florida State, USF, UCF. There's going to be that, but at the end of the day, it basically is just keeping you up to speed on what's going on in the Florida schools. Um, so, I happen to I know Mario Cristobal is pretty good. Um, and I like the folks down at Miami. There's a lot of good people down there. Doesn't necessarily mean as a person who controls the content there that I'm going to pull for Miami or not, because I have friends at all of the schools. Um, what was the other one? I don't think the ACC can get it. No, and I don't think they could either. I don't think that the goal is Boomer, as you just said. I agree 100%. That it doesn't make any sense to do it, because you're just adding. I mean, at the end of the day, sometimes more is just more. It doesn't. There's no value,
Right. Right.
and so
Yeah.
why do I want to bring in more? And that leads to your point, which I agree wholeheartedly with. That maybe two for each school, for each conference, with the Big Ten and the Big 12. I'm sorry, the Big Ten and the Southeastern Conference. Because why do you want to bring in more schools that you have to feed, that are not as valuable as the schools you already have? I can't. I'll tell you what. I've as bad as I know that I don't think Miami, Florida State, Clemson, or North Carolina, any one of those four schools can make an argument that they're worth $100 million.
No, they well yeah, it's absolutely fact. It's not a guess.
Mm.
Yeah. And it's not
So
because they're not successful. It's not. Look, Miami is Miami. 5 national championships in over 50 years
right,
is no joke. But that doesn't necessarily. It's a private school,
right.
and it doesn't have the greatest graduate base out there, right? The
It's
numbers are high, but it's nothing like Ohio State.
all right. Let me
And
help you out. Let me help you out here with Miami.
sure, if you want.
Miami is a school of 10,000 people. They play at a football stadium that's a 45-minute drive away from the campus in Coral Gables. Okay. Um, they're they're not a powerhouse from a standpoint of money. They generate money, but they don't. You know, it's not. Miami's a private school that, if you wanted to look at it this way, um, academically, they're a Stanford type school. That's the way they work. As a matter of fact, the president of the school, and not just one, but a couple of presidents of the school, said that they wanted it to be, they meaning Miami, wanted to be the Stanford of the East. Well, guess what? They're now in the same conference with Stanford, so you don't have to worry about that.
Right.
But yeah, Miami's a smaller school. I mean, it's a private school, so smaller school. It's a great deal harder for them to um, to compete. I think one of the things that they like is that they've been competitive again and made it all the way to the championship game last year. Um, and they did that um, by not winning the actual ACC
That's
championship.
right.
Uh,
That's why. Yeah. That's the
so
perceived weakness of the conference.
yeah,
When Duke wins your conference at 8-5, that screams as badly as the Big 12 not winning a playoff game in 2
hmm
years or 3
yeah,
years, right? That both of those things make both of those conferences look extremely weak.
right,
And until somebody besides Miami in the ACC wins a couple playoff games, that
right,
perception is not going to change. In fact, it's just going to become more polar, where it's going to be Miami and everybody else. The same thing at the Big 12. Big 12 they're not going to get two teams in, especially now with the Notre Dame MOU, where they're all they have to be is 12 or higher. Almost every year you can guarantee Notre Dame is going to be 12 or higher, so
yeah,
that's a guaranteed playoff spot, which immediately relegates the Big 12 to only one playoff spot. I don't care, two 12-0 teams playing for the championship each year still won't get two teams into the playoff, I think. And
no,
so it's a pitiful statement of where we are with the playoff. Um, and Brett Yormark has ownership, should have ownership for a lot of that, because he had a chance to get two guaranteed teams in every year,
hmm
um, and didn't sign off to the 4-4-2-2 deal.
right,
This is where we are. It's not going to change until these two conferences change their stars. They change the paradigm, and somebody other than Miami not only wins a playoff game, but can make deep runs in the playoff.
right.
That's
You
just the way it is.
be consistent again,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
that's and I honestly I don't see Florida State being there. I don't see Clemson being there for different reasons, and you know it's been a crazy situation. But at the end of the day, I think you and I agree that the Big Ten and the Big and the SEC are probably going to 20 teams, and there's no reason for them to go to 24. They're going to get
I
the
agree.
number they want, and why subsidize? You as I said before, more is just more. Uh, I don't think that's what they want, and I think that what we hope, or what I hope, I should say, is that both the Big 12 and the ACC can understand and work together, knowing that they actually need each other. Otherwise, this thing's going to get way out of hand.
I think it is already way out of hand.
No, it is,
It's
but
it's
there still can be competitive. There's still
look,
competition there.
yeah, my school is definitely um,
Your
while the
school's one
money.
of the only 21 schools in the country that makes money.
Yeah, part of that is because we're private and we pay cash for everything. If you don't have any debt, you can make a ton of money.
Yeah, if you don't have credit cards, you're in good shape.
Yeah, and they could make BYU is this close to taking the next step. The next step is updating their facilities and upgrading their stadium. If BYU can go out and win a playoff game, make the
hmm
playoff and win a playoff game this year, maybe even host a playoff game,
hmm
and then next year can get back again. I think it'll take 2 years, but if 2 years they get to the playoff, the next three, let's say that,
hmm
um, I think the school will update its stadium. I think they already have the plans, from what I understand. They already have the plans to do that, but they're not going to do it until there's a little more certitude what's going on out in the world of football. The worst thing you'd want to do is put $1 billion into a new stadium and then find out that you're not really able to compete year in year out for a Division One or whatever the upper division is going to be of college football because of realignment, consolidation, reorganization, however, whatever word you want to use there. That would be stupid money chasing after stupid money. So
Right.
if you build it, they will come. Right? Field of
There you
dreams.
go.
If you get to the playoff, you
You
win a
got to build
playoff
it
game or
though.
two.
You got to build it in Utah, not in Iowa. That's the
Yeah,
key.
no. And I'm telling you right now, Josh Pate had his playoff predictor, and he said he had LSU coming to Provo in December for a first round game this year. I would love that. Can you imagine LSU and BYU playing in the snow in December? That would be incredible.
I as a bona fide someone who dislikes Lane Kiffin. I personally, I'll tell you what, I don't do this a lot, but I'd pay to watch that game. I would go to Utah. You and I could go to dinner, and I would watch.
That
We
would
could
be
go out
awesome.
to the.
I would
We could
love
go
that.
out to the stadium and watch that game, and I'd wear BYU sweatshirts and all
Very
the
good.
paraphernalia that they got because
We'll get you geared up. I'll take
there
you
you
down to
go. Yeah,
Provo and we'll
I'll
whole
buy the
deal.
merch. I don't care. I just here's a
Well,
couple quick ones. This is
sure.
my
Yeah, go ahead.
the ACC roller hockey. That's funny. Yeah, and then Carla agrees, but yeah, we'll get I've taken up way too much of your time,
Oh,
and you've been so
I'm
kind
glad I had it to give
to
to you. This has
join
been
to
fun,
join.
Tim.
But hang with me here for a minute and
Okay.
make sure Nate make sure that Nate buys you a cougar tail. Oh, okay, I get what you're
That's,
talking about.
it's a big donut, really
There you
long.
all right. There you go. Well, I'll tell you what, folks. Hang with me after this because I want to give you Frank's information.
Oh, that'd be
But
great. Yeah.
yeah. Anyway, folks, it is after 1 o'clock here on the East Coast, and strange as it may sound, life we do have to get on with life here, and so I'm gonna Boomer. It's always a pleasure, my friend, to have you on and to chat and to understand that we're really not trying to drive people crazy. It just it just happens that way. It's it's the old saying, life is what happens when you're busy making plans, and
There you go.
it's where
Exactly
we
right.
are right now. So anyway,
Exactly
thanks
right.
everybody, and we'll see you tomorrow. We're going to talk a little bit baseball, and
Fun.
have a great Tuesday.
Bye, everybody.
We're back.